She was dragged out of Grace Chapel, New York City, with her baby after her husband's funeral until a millionaire parked beside her and opened the door. "If you do not sign this waiver, you are not stepping foot in this church," Claire Bennett snapped, her voice sharp and cold as steel. Emma Taylor clutched her infant closer. The baby's knit blanket was already damp from the drizzle. Her eyes were tired and rimmed with red, but her voice, though soft, did not waver. "He was my husband," she whispered. "I have every right to be here." "You were never his equal," came a deeper voice behind Claire. It was Nathan Whitmore, Liam's older brother, stepping forward with a folded document in hand. "You're just some girl from wherever. You don't belong to this family." The doors to Grace Chapel loomed just behind them, slightly ajar. Through the narrow opening, Emma could see the altar adorned with white lilies, and, beyond that, a simple photograph of Liam Carter. His smile was forever frozen, framed in black ribbon. Her knees wavered, but she held her ground. "I don't want your money," she said, her accent faint but present. "I just want to say goodbye." Claire's mouth tightened. "Then sign the waiver. Deny any claim to his estate. That's all we ask." Emma's voice cracked, straining under the weight of sorrow. "You mean everything he left for our son? You want me to act like we never existed?" Nathan stepped forward, impatience flaring in his eyes. "Sign it or leave." The air grew still. A few guests standing near the entrance turned their heads, unease spreading through the crowd. No one stepped forward. No one spoke up. Emma looked down at her baby, whose cheeks had flushed from the cold. She kissed his forehead, then turned her eyes toward the doors one last time. A final breath, a final hope. She shook her head. "No," she said, her voice firm and final. Nathan didn't wait. He grabbed her arm with force and shoved her back. "Then get out." The baby cried out as Emma stumbled down the steps, barely managing to keep her footing. She caught herself against the rail, shielding her son with her body. Her heart thundered in her chest. "You're making a scene," Claire hissed, adjusting her black gloves. "This is a respectable family." Emma looked around in desperation. The guests stood frozen, avoiding her gaze. Some whispered. Others turned away. Then the doors slammed behind her. She stood motionless on the church steps. The light rain turned into a steady fall. Her coat clung to her body, her breath catching in the chill. The baby whimpered, shifting in her arms. She pulled him closer, whispering soft Spanish lullabies to calm him. She stepped away from Grace Chapel slowly, her feet heavy with grief. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stand outside the place where she had just been erased. At the end of the block, she found a low concrete ledge and sat down heavily, pulling her child against her chest. Her tears mingled with the rain, rolling freely down her cheeks. She thought of Liam, not in the casket but alive, sitting in bed, smiling through pain, joking with her even when his body had grown frail. Cancer had taken everything, piece by piece, but he never let her see fear. He had held her hand the night before he passed and whispered, "If anything happens, he'll come." She asked him who. He promised. She hadn't understood then. Liam had planned for this. He had known his family would turn on her, and now they wouldn't even let her see him buried. She rocked gently, whispering into her son's hair. Her body shielded him from the cold. His small hand curled into the collar of her coat, clinging to her like she was the only solid thing left in the world. The street moved around them. Strangers walked by, umbrellas bobbing, cars rushing past. No one stopped. She was invisible, just another woman lost to grief. Until the sound of tires slowed on the wet pavement nearby. A sleek black car pulled up beside the curb. The engine went quiet, and the window rolled down. Emma barely noticed until the back door opened. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a dark overcoat, holding a large black umbrella. His shoes splashed in the puddles as he stepped forward. "Emma?" he asked gently. She looked up, startled. She didn't recognize him, but there was something in his expression, an understanding, a steadiness, that pierced through the fog of her despair. Emma could not move. Her body was numb, soaked through from the rain. Her arms ached from holding the baby too tightly, too long. She stared at the stranger kneeling in front of her, unsure if she was still in the real world or drifting in a grief-induced dream. The man, tall, olive-skinned, maybe late 30s, looked like he had walked out of a courtroom. His suit was simple, clean, dark gray, no tie. Rain dotted his shoulders, but he didn't flinch. His voice was low, steady, and undeniably kind. "My name is Ethan Brooks," he said again. "I was Liam's friend." Emma blinked rapidly. "I've never heard of you." "I know," Ethan nodded gently. "We met years ago. I was doing humanitarian legal work in Central America. There was an accident in the countryside. I was caught in a collapsed shelter, bleeding badly. Liam was the only reason I survived." He paused, glancing at the child nestled against her chest. "He carried me 4 miles to a clinic, stayed with me through the night. I asked him why he didn't leave me behind, and he said, 'My wife would never forgive me.'" Emma's breath hitched. Ethan looked directly at her. "He talked about you constantly. Said you had the fiercest heart and the gentlest soul. Said if anything ever happened to him and I was still breathing, I had to find you, help you, protect you." He stood slowly, stepped back to the car, and reached inside. When he returned, he held a large manila envelope, sealed and slightly weathered. "This isn't a contract," he said. "Not in the legal sense." He crouched again and handed it to her with both hands, with reverence. "It's what I call a compassion contract. It's my written promise to you, signed last year after I visited Liam in the States. He made me draft it. He said I'd find you one day. It says, in his words, that I am to treat you as family. No hidden agenda, no strings, just a vow of honor." Emma held the envelope but did not open it. Her fingers trembled around the edges, as if they were holding something sacred. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "You're not supposed to," Ethan replied calmly. "I'm not here to replace him. I'm not here to rescue you. I'm just here because he asked me to be." Emma lowered her gaze to her baby. The child's eyes fluttered open, restless, as if sensing something unfamiliar but safe. "I don't have anywhere to go," she said quietly, the first true admission of her fear. "Then let's start there," Ethan said. "Come with me. I've arranged a temporary place. Quiet, clean, safe. You don't have to decide anything today, but you should not be alone in this moment." He stood, then opened the back door of the car and held it open. Rain splashed against the pavement. Emma sat still for several seconds more. Then slowly, carefully, she rose to her feet, pressing the baby closer to her chest. She took one last look over her shoulder toward Grace Chapel, far down the block, where the doors remained shut to her. Then she turned and stepped toward the open car door. Ethan extended a hand to help her in. Emma hesitated, but then, with a quiet breath, she placed her hand in his. It was warm, steady, and in that touch, for the first time since Liam died, she felt something unexpected. She was not invisible anymore. She stepped into the car. The door closed behind her with a soft thud, and for the first time in days, she exhaled. The apartment was too clean, too quiet. Emma stood by the doorway, holding her son close, as if unsure whether to step further inside or turn back. Ethan set her suitcase down gently in the hallway, careful not to let it thud against the wooden floor. He didn't say much, just looked at her with calm, unassuming eyes and offered a soft, "Make yourself at home." She almost flinched at the phrase. Home had stopped meaning anything solid months ago. Still, she stepped inside. It was a beautiful space, modern but warm. Soft lighting glowed from corner lamps instead of harsh overhead fixtures. Pale green and warm taupe walls gave the apartment a quiet serenity. There was no clutter, no personal excess, but nothing about it felt cold. Ethan led her to the back, where a door stood slightly ajar. "This is for the baby," he said, pushing it open with care. Emma froze. The nursery wasn't elaborate, but it was full of thought. A white crib with a soft gray blanket, a small shelf with neatly arranged board books and plush toys. A container of formula sat beside clean bottles on a counter. Diapers were stacked under the changing table, wipes within easy reach. There was a soft rug and, near the window, a tiny wooden rocking chair with a yellow cushion. Emma blinked. "I had some help setting it up," Ethan added quickly, sensing her surprise. "A friend of mine has a baby girl. She helped pick out the right stuff, made sure it was all safe and comfortable." Emma swallowed hard. Her instincts fought with themselves. Gratitude pressed against suspicion. Everything was so generous, so prepared, so intentional. She looked around slowly, absorbing every small detail. There was no name on the door, no decorations, no assumptions. He had given her a space, not a statement. "Thank you," she said quietly, though her voice barely reached her own ears. Ethan didn't press her to speak more. He simply nodded and stepped back. "I'll let you get settled. If you need anything, I'll be in the office down the hall." And he left her alone. In the days that followed, Ethan kept his distance. He was always there, but never too close. He worked quietly from his home office, answered emails in the kitchen, occasionally passed through the hallway with a polite smile and a soft good morning. Groceries appeared in the fridge, but he never commented if she ate or didn't. The kitchen was hers to use. She cooked only when she felt grounded enough to. He didn't hover, didn't ask personal questions. Still, Emma remained on edge. She kept her hair tied tightly, her body always slightly angled away. Her voice was quiet, clipped. Every night, she checked the locks twice. Every time Ethan passed her in the hallway, a flicker of tension coiled inside her, a ghost from another life whispering that kindness never lasted. But the change never came. The kindness stayed, and slowly, her body began to loosen in small ways. Her shoulders dropped by a degree. Her voice grew a touch less guarded. Then came the moment that undid her. It was a soft, uneventful afternoon. Breakfast had been quiet, scrambled eggs, tea, the baby's soft cooing. Emma had put her son down for a nap and walked into her room. On the nightstand next to the lamp was a photo frame. She paused, her breath catching. She walked over slowly and picked it up. It was a picture of Liam, one she hadn't seen in over a year. He was laughing, arms folded, standing in front of a food truck they had visited on their third date. The sun was in his hair, and his shirt had mustard on it from the hot dog she teased him about. She remembered how he tried to say something in Spanish and butchered it, and how she had laughed until she cried. Her eyes welled now, but the tears were different, softer. Beneath the frame was a folded note, written in neat, even script. "He's still here." She turned, startled. Ethan was standing quietly in the hallway, a soft cloth in his hand. His eyes met hers gently, cautiously. "I found it in a box Liam left with me," he said. "I wasn't sure. I didn't want to intrude, but I thought maybe it would help." Emma stared at the photo again. "You cleaned it," she murmured. Ethan nodded. "There was a little dust. I wanted it to look loved." She couldn't speak. Her throat tightened too much. No one had done something like this for her since Liam's death. Everyone else had wanted her to move on, heal faster, rebuild. But Ethan, he honored what was. She wiped her eyes slowly and placed the frame back with care. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once and turned away, leaving her with silence and a soft ache in her chest. For the first time, she didn't feel like a guest. She felt seen. And in that simple, silent room, Liam didn't feel gone. He felt close. The wooden box sat quietly on the edge of the shelf in Emma's room. It was small, unassuming, the kind of thing one might overlook until they needed it. Emma noticed it one evening after putting her son to sleep. A handwritten note was taped gently to the lid, "When you're ready." She hesitated before lifting it. The box was light, but carried a heaviness all its own. Inside, neatly tied with a faded blue ribbon, were several letters. Envelopes yellowed with time, the ink slightly smudged. She recognized the handwriting immediately, Liam's. Her hands shook as she pulled out the first letter. It was addressed not to her, but to Ethan. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I probably couldn't dodge the inevitable. Cancer's a slow thief, but it's honest. Thank you for being there, for keeping the promise I'm about to ask you to make. Emma will not trust easily. She'll be scared, angry, and quiet. When that happens, don't push her. Just make tea. Sit near her. She'll speak when her heart can bear it." Tears pricked Emma's eyes. She reached for the next envelope, addressed to her. "Mita, I wanted to write this before the pain blurred my thoughts. I know how hard it will be without me, and I hate that I can't be the one holding you through it. But I left you in the care of someone who sees you, not just as my wife, but as your own soul. I trusted Ethan not because he's strong or wealthy, but because he understands that silence is not absence and kindness doesn't need an audience. If you're reading this now and you're still afraid, don't be. Let him make the tea. Let him listen. And remember, you were never just my wife. You were my miracle. I love you until my last breath. Liam. The letter trembled in her hands. She held it to her chest, her breathing shallow. She hadn't cried like this in weeks. That night, she didn't sleep. At dawn, she walked into the kitchen, her robe pulled tightly around her. Ethan was already there, standing by the stove. He didn't look up. He simply reached for a mug, poured hot water over chamomile flowers, and set it down on the table. Then he sat across from her, not too close, not too far, and waited. He didn't ask questions. He didn't try to comfort her with words that couldn't touch the ache in her chest. He just stayed. I read them, she said quietly. I know, he replied, just as softly. She looked down into the steam of the tea, then back up at him. Her voice trembled. He knew me, even at the end. He did, Ethan said. And he trusted you to carry on just as you are. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. And then Emma did something she hadn't done with anyone but Liam. She talked, not about grief or legal battles, but about life. She told Ethan about her childhood, how she danced barefoot on the rooftop in the rain in Bogota, how she dreamed of learning English not for school, but so she could understand the lyrics of the songs Liam sent her during their long-distance days. She told him about the first time Liam kissed her, awkward and bold, and how she had laughed because he knocked over a salt shaker trying to impress her. Ethan didn't interrupt once. When she paused, he offered her a tissue, not a speech, not a plan, just presence. By the time the tea had cooled, something had shifted between them. Not romance, not resolution, but the beginning of a kind of tenderness born not from passion but from understanding. And in that soft morning light, surrounded by letters and memories, Emma no longer felt like a widow holding on to a past. She felt like a woman still worthy of being seen. The envelope arrived one crisp morning in a thick ivory sleeve embossed with gold. Emma's fingers trembled as she opened it, already sensing its weight. Inside, folded with precision, was a court summons. Claire and Nathan Whitmore were suing for custody of Emma's son, claiming she was emotionally unstable, financially dependent, unfit to provide a stable environment for a child. She sat at the kitchen table, the documents spread before her like a wound. Her hands shook as she tried to breathe through the rising panic. Ethan read it silently, jaw clenched. Then he set it down and looked at her. They are not taking your son, he said firmly. Emma blinked through a blur of tears. But they have money, lawyers. They'll say anything to make me look. Ethan gently placed a hand over hers. Then we won't just fight. We'll show them the truth. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan poured himself into the case, not with aggression but with quiet purpose. He didn't just prepare a defense, he built a narrative, a portrait. Every night, he compiled photos, candid moments of Emma holding her son while reading to him in both English and Spanish, bathing him, feeding him, singing softly as she swayed with him in her arms. Some of these pictures, Emma didn't even know he had taken. He printed them, captioned each with a date, a time, a note, and then carefully placed them in a leather-bound album embossed with the boy's name. This, Ethan said one evening, setting the book in front of her, is not evidence. It's a story. His story. And yours. Emma flipped through it slowly, her eyes filling with quiet, stunned emotion. You made this? He nodded. You didn't see yourself the way I did. The hearing came on a rainy Thursday. Emma sat stiffly in the courtroom, her nerves coiled like wire. Her son rested with a caregiver in the hallway. The courtroom itself felt cold, clinical. Claire and Nathan arrived with polished attorneys and measured expressions. They sat tall, confident, with files of accusations and statements stacked before them. Emma felt small, exposed, as her name was called and questions began. Her voice shook, her palms sweated, her answers felt clipped, incomplete. Her eyes darted toward Ethan once, just once, and under the table, his hand found hers. His fingers closed around hers in a gentle, grounding squeeze. It didn't fix everything, but it was enough. Then Ethan stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't attack. He walked to the center of the room, holding the album like a sacred object. He placed it on the table in front of the judge and opened it. "This," he said, his voice calm and deliberate, "is what motherhood looks like." He turned a page. A woman teaching her son the word for light. Another page. A woman up all night when he had a fever, rocking him in the living room. And another. A woman who had been called unfit, but who had never once asked for anything other than the chance to love her child. He paused. "I'm not standing here because Liam asked me to help her. I'm here because I've seen her every single day. And no man, living or gone, would love a woman like this and call her anything less than a mother." Silence fell. Even Claire shifted in her seat. The judge flipped slowly through the album, her expression unreadable. Then she closed it gently and said, "Thank you, Mr. Brooks." Outside the courtroom, Emma exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. She turned to Ethan, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You didn't have to do all of that," she whispered. He looked at her with that same quiet steadiness. "Yes," he said, "I did." And in the stillness between them, something deeper than relief settled in, something beginning to look a lot like trust. The knock came just as the sky turned orange behind the city skyline. Emma had just settled the baby into the crib when the sound echoed down the hall, measured, quiet, but unmistakably intentional. She hesitated at the door. Ethan had seen her pause. He emerged from the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. His eyes met hers gently. "You don't have to open it," he said. "But if you do, whatever you feel, it's okay. I'll be here when you're done." She gave a tight nod and walked slowly to the door. On the other side stood Claire. Emma hadn't seen her since the custody hearing. The older woman's hair was neatly pinned as always, but there was something different now. Not just age, but softness, maybe, or exhaustion. A quiet surrender. She didn't speak. Instead, she pulled a folded cloth from her purse, cream-colored, with a faded blue border. Emma's breath caught. The cloth. She remembered it vividly, the one she used to dab Liam's forehead in his final hours. She had left it behind on the hospital chair, too shaken to notice, too broken to remember. Now it was here, clean, folded, held in the hands of the woman who once tried to erase her. Claire extended it with both hands, still saying nothing. Emma's eyes burned as she reached out slowly and accepted the cloth with trembling fingers. For a long moment, she simply stared at it. Then softly, Claire spoke. "He loved this," she said, her voice hushed. "He kept it under his pillow." That was all she said. There was no apology, no explanation, just the silent offering of something deeply personal, something sacred. Emma looked up, unsure whether to speak, whether to invite her in or let her go. Claire only nodded once, her lips parting as if to say something, but instead stepping back and walking away. Emma closed the door behind her. She stood there for a moment, clutching the cloth to her chest, until her knees threatened to give way. She turned and walked slowly down the hallway. The apartment was quiet, but the light over the kitchen table was still on. Ethan sat there, reading a book, a warm glow casting shadows over the room. A mug of tea steamed beside an empty chair, and folded neatly was a fresh hand towel. He didn't say anything when she entered. She walked toward him, her steps heavy with the weight of the moment. He looked up and saw her face, streaked with silent tears. Without a word, he pushed the towel toward her and rose halfway from his seat, offering it gently. "You don't have to be strong right now," he said, his voice steady. Emma took the towel and sat down beside him, still holding the cloth Claire had returned. She didn't speak, and neither did he. They sat there in silence, not the kind born from awkwardness, but the kind that made space for things too deep for words, for grief that lingered, for kindness that healed. It was the first moment they shared that didn't belong to Liam's memory. It belonged to them, not as widow and caretaker, but simply as two people who had learned to stay, even when everything else had fallen away. The backyard was modest, tucked behind Maplewood Apartments, Brooklyn. It was framed by ivy-covered brick walls and a wooden fence weathered by seasons. Strings of soft lights hung overhead, swaying slightly in the early evening breeze. Tea candles flickered on small tables surrounded by fresh flowers and delicate plates of fruit and pastries. Emma stepped back to take it all in. The space felt gentle, intimate, alive with quiet joy. This had been her idea. Not a memorial, not another ceremony steeped in grief and gray suits, but a gathering. A chance for the people who had known Liam, not through headlines or family lines, but through kindness, to remember him without sorrow, to remember his light. No tears, she had told Ethan. Only stories. Good ones. He simply nodded and said, "Then we'll make it beautiful." And he did. She had watched him string lights late into the night, even climbing a shaky ladder in his suit pants, muttering about his fear of heights. He arranged every seat, every plate, exactly the way she described. When she looked tired, he poured her tea. When she hesitated, he reassured with nothing more than a glance. He never made the night about himself, only about Liam, and somehow, about her. Their home was filled with quiet rituals. Ethan brewing coffee every morning before Emma woke. Emma packing an extra sandwich as now guests were arriving. Neighbors, former coworkers, volunteers from shelters Liam once served. There were no formal speeches, no dress code, just warmth. Emma greeted each person with a calm smile, often holding her son in one arm, his small hand tugging at the edge of her shawl. She offered tea, introduced names, nodded gently when someone began a story with, "I don't know if you ever knew this, but Liam once." There were many of those stories. A woman shared how Liam had secretly paid for her daughter's treatment when insurance failed them, leaving a blank envelope with cash and a note that read, "Keep this between you and healing." An elderly man recalled how Liam used to bring him meals every Thursday without fail, always staying for a game of checkers, never judging his broken past. A teenager stood and said that Liam once told him, "You're not your mistakes. You're the one who decides what's next." That boy was now in college. Each story layered a new image of Liam, not as the man Emma once kissed goodnight, but as the man who had quietly given so much of himself to the world. It humbled her. It healed something in her she didn't know was still wounded. As dusk deepened into a blanket of stars, the lights above grew warmer, casting golden halos over everyone below. Laughter rose, mingling with the faint sound of classical guitar playing through an old speaker. Emma had just finished refilling the tea station when she glanced across the garden. Near the corner where the lavender bushes swayed in the breeze stood Ethan. He was holding her son, bouncing him gently in his arms. The boy giggled, tugging at Ethan's collar, and Ethan laughed, not loudly, but the kind of laugh that wrapped around the child like safety. Something in Emma softened. She had seen him serious, protective, steady, but this was tenderness without effort, fatherly without claim. She walked toward him slowly, her shawl fluttering with the breeze. The lights above them glowed softly, turning his dark hair to burnished gold, highlighting the quiet curve of his smile. She stopped beside him and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. He looked at her with that same quiet steadiness. "You don't have to be strong right now," he said, his voice steady. Emma nodded. She didn't speak. In that moment, there were no ghosts between them, no shadows of loss. Just the present, the child in his arms, the warmth in her hand, the softness of shared silence. For the first time, she wasn't stepping out of grief. She was stepping into something new, and it felt right. 3 years passed, and the world did not pause to notice the love growing quietly in a modest corner of the city. There were no wedding announcements in glossy magazines, no rings flashing on social media, no dramatic declarations, no Mr. and Mrs. introductions. But what Emma and Ethan built together was real. Together, they founded Carter's Legacy Foundation, a foundation for single mothers and widows who had once stood where Emma had, on the outside, scared and invisible, told they were not enough. Now Emma was the face of the organization. She welcomed each woman with the same gentleness Ethan had once shown her, offering not pity but dignity. She didn't just manage programs. She created space for stories, for rebuilding, for hope. "I know what it's like," she often said, "to feel like you've lost everything and still have to be strong. But you don't have to do it alone." She spoke not from theory, but from memory. Behind the scenes, Ethan took care of everything else: financials, legal logistics, fundraising networks. But he never stepped into the spotlight, never once asked for his name on a plaque or a headline. He let the light fall on Emma and stood just outside it, proud and content. Every now and then, someone would ask if they were together. Emma would smile and say, "We're exactly where we're supposed to be." Briefcase, always with a handwritten note tucked inside. Friday nights were for puzzles and storybooks with her son, who now called Ethan T. They didn't need labels. What they had was a rhythm, a tenderness built on trust, a bond that had started with grief and become something steadier, something rooted. On the third anniversary of the foundation, Emma stood by the glass window of the main office, watching as women she had once held through tears now laughed and walked out into jobs, into new apartments, into lives. A soft voice broke her thoughts. "Are you ready for the walk?" She turned. Ethan was waiting by the door, one hand resting on the handle of the stroller. The little boy inside was nearly 4 now, cheeks rosy from an afternoon nap. Emma nodded. She slipped on her shawl and joined him outside, where the sun was beginning to set over the park across the street. They strolled slowly, hand in hand, the path winding through golden leaves. Children laughed in the distance, a breeze rustled through the trees. They didn't talk much, they didn't need to. As they walked, Emma looked over at Ethan. He was focused on the boy in the stroller, pointing out birds, naming trees, humming a quiet tune under his breath. She smiled, then looked forward again, her eyes soft, her heart full. This wasn't the life she thought she'd have. It wasn't the one she'd planned. It was better. And in that final image, Emma walking with her son, her hand in Ethan's, the world gently moving around them. There was no need for explanation, no wedding dress, no grand declarations. Just love. Simple. Unshakable. Enough. Thank you for walking with us through Emma's journey. A story of heartbreak, dignity, quiet resilience, and the healing power of love that honors the past while embracing the future. If this story moved your heart, gave you hope, or reminded you that even in our darkest moments, compassion can find us, we invite you to become part of our community. Subscribe to the Soul Stirring Stories channel for more powerful emotional stories that uplift, inspire, and remind us of the beauty in being human. Because every story we tell has the power to heal, and the next one might just be yours.